Hey guys, welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. Obviously with everything that's going on in the world right now with the coronavirus, a lot of things have been running a little bit differently. Movie theaters, a lot of movies that were, coming out have gotten, postponed for the time being. So we don't know when we're really going to be getting some of these new films, once hopefully all this stuff clears up fairly soon. So for the time being, I figured where I have a ton of movies at my disposal, I figured that I would do some, reviews for you guys of, some like older films. So some are going to be, kind of be like all over the place, going to be really no rhyme or reason except for the one that we're going to talk about today. I figured it would be appropriate with St. Patrick's Day right around the corner to talk about Leprechaun. Yes, if you guys have never seen this film, I will give you a heads up. It is definitely it's a cheesy horror film, so know what you're getting going into it film, because it's got its moments. It teeters on the line of horror / comedy, probably a little bit more comedy than the horror aspect of it, because it's really not too scary in my opinion. But basically, how this film starts out is you have this guy who he's just like come back from Ireland, and he's talking with his wife and tells her that they're rich now, don't have to worry about anything, because he's got this this bag of gold that he ended up getting from this leprechaun. He ended up tricking him to give it to him, and sure enough, that leprechaun ended up following him back to the United States here, and things happen. Basically, the leprechaun ends up getting locked up in this crate down in the basement, and then we fast forward to 10 years later. Now, at this point, you have this father and daughter that end up moving into this house. We get to see the house. It's been abandoned for a little while because, there's cobwebs and stuff like that, and we see that crate where the leprechaun is down in the basement. And the daughter is actually played by Jennifer Aniston, which I don't know, top of my head, forgive me, I don't know if this was her very first role as far as like film goes, but I know it was definitely like one of them that really shot her kind of like to stardom, which is kind of funny, if you think about it. You also had, wasn't the same scenario, but it's funny because you had in Critters 3 Leonardo DiCaprio, and that was like his first film, and he doesn't really like to talk about that too much anymore, but it's just interesting how some of these older horror films had these these stars that kind of ended up blowing up after they did these horror films. So it's pretty cool. But anyways, and there will be some spoilers in this review. I'm not going to go through like every single little thing, but there's definitely going to be like some spoilers because this film has been out since 1993. So just a heads up. But basically, this father and daughter, they end up moving into this house. When they get there, there's this group of painters, and they're helping them, renovate the house and everything like that. This group of people, there's this one guy, his name's Ozzy. He's kind of he's a little slow. But he's a really likable character. Actually, pretty much all of the characters in this film, I thought, because I actually just rewatched it today, I thought were pretty, likable. Yes, they definitely make some, dumb decisions here and there, but I thought for the most part for a horror film, they were pretty likable. So, you're really, you're rooting for them. But yeah, you have Ozzy, then you have this little kid, his name's Alex, I believe. And then his like older brother, who's quite a bit older, his name is Nathan. And so basically that's the group of people that are at this house. And what ends up happening is the leprechaun, for those who have never seen this film, is it's a little bit different than like a film, like Child's Play, because I've seen a lot of people, it's like, well, you can just always, Chucky's just this little doll, you can always just kick him, and it's not too hard to beat Chucky. But with the leprechaun, you could almost say the same thing, because whereas the leprechaun, he's short and everything like that, you can't, because he actually has like magical powers and stuff like that. And one of his things that he's able to do is he's able to mimic the voices of like, different people and things like that. So he ends up tricking Ozzy to come downstairs and ends up freeing him from this crate. Won't tell you like how he does it, but he ends up, freeing him from the crate, and then, he's running around. He talks to Ozzy for like a few minutes, kind of makes a couple wisecracks. He kind of has, the comedy to a degree of like, you know, Freddy Krueger, as kind of Freddy got on like later in the Nightmare on Elm Street series. So you can definitely see that. And he's played by Warwick Davis. And he definitely, you know, as far as like his like costume and everything, I thought that looks, you know, looks great. And I thought Warwick Davis did a good job playing this character. He's definitely, at least for like horror fans, I feel like, you know, a lot of people kind of know who the Leprechaun is. At this point, I think they have like 7, 8 films or something like that. So it's definitely a franchise that's been around for a little while now. But yeah, he does a good job, I thought, just as overall his role, you know. I think everyone in this film kind of knew what they had. They didn't take this thing too seriously. And you can tell, I think, that he had a fun time playing this character. So when he gets out, he's, you know, saying these, you know, different things to Ozzy. And no one he ends up hiding. And no one really believes Ozzy when he tells them that he saw a leprechaun downstairs, because he's always blabbing about like magic and stuff like that. So they don't really, you know, believe that there's an actual leprechaun down in the basement. But, you know, as the film kind of goes on, different things start to happen, and, you know, they start to realize that there's definitely something like weird going on here. There's some really like funny scenes in this film. So one of the funny scenes that I thought was at one point, so, you know, they're outside and they're working on like painting the house or whatever, and Jennifer Aniston's character, her name's Tori, she ends up going to, like, over to the truck to get like some paint or whatever, and she's standing there, and you see, you know, the camera goes down below and you see the leprechaun, and he, like, you know, grabs her leg, starts like caressing it, and, you know, she laughs because she thinks it's Nathan, which is kind of weird because, like, how would he have like gotten underneath the truck to be able to like do that so fast? But yeah, she thinks it's him at first, quickly realizes it isn't because she looks behind and sees him over there, so then she kind of freaks out, and then the leprechaun, he scratches her leg. Well, you know, her dad and then Nathan, they like come over, and she's like, oh, you know, freaking out, there was something underneath the truck. And then she's like, oh, there was like someone, I thought it was you, you know, grabbed me, like caressing my leg. And he was like, oh, you would have, like, you let me? But yeah, the funny part is when, you know, Jennifer Aniston's character, she's like, I know what it feels like to have a guy caressing my leg. And her dad just kind of looks at her and he's like, you do? So that was hilarious, I thought. I don't know. But yeah, so, you know, different things start happening. And then at this point, they end up hearing like a cat. And so they're like, oh, that was what was underneath the car. You know, it was just a cat all along. So they go over to like the woods because they think the cat's like over there. And, you know, it's the leprechaun. But the dad, he ends up like seeing this like hole in the ground. And he ends up, or like in a tree or whatever, and he ends up like sticking his like whole like arm in there to try and get this, like, you know, he thinks cat out of there, which is kind of like dumb. You know, it's definitely dumb to like a degree or whatever, but, you know, the leprechaun, he ends up biting his hand, and they still think it's like, or at least he still thinks it's like a cat. He's like, oh my god, it like bit me. So they have to end up bringing the guy to the hospital at this point. But I was just like, there is no way, with like the amount of blood that's coming on like all over this guy's like hand, it's like there was no way that a cat did that to your hand. But yeah, so they ended up like bringing him to the hospital. And to rewind back like real quick too, before like the whole painting incident happens, you have Ozzy and Alex. They end up seeing this rainbow, and Ozzy's like, oh, like there's, you know, a leprechaun's goal is always at the end of like a rainbow. So they end up like going over there, and they actually end up finding like their leprechaun's gold. And so, you know, as an audience, you're like, damn, you guys are, you know, don't take that gold. But sure enough, somehow Ozzy ends up he goes to bite it to test to see if it's like real gold, and he ends up swallowing it, which I thought was like, you know, kind of odd. But yeah, so they end up taking the gold. You know, they decide to kind of keep it on the hush-hush for now because they don't want to tell like the adults because they think that they're going to take it away. But basically, that's how you get the whole thing with the leprechaun, you know, coming after these guys, because the leprechaun's thing is like when someone steals his gold, he goes after him and basically like kills anyone that gets in his way. So when they end up bringing like the dad to the hospital, they go over to this like shop to get like the coin like looked at just to see, you know, like how much it's worth. So they end up leaving like one of the coins with this guy because he's gonna like look at it for him. Sure enough, the Leprechaun, he ends up basically, he goes over to the shop, ends up killing the owner by pogoing on this guy's chest, which is a crazy way to die. But that's one of the things in this film, like, with that, like, kill, later on, and like a little bit later, he ends up going after a police officer because this cop ends up pulling him over. He's in this like little small like car that like is like driving on like the highway, pulls him over, and like the Leprechaun ends up like scratching his face and doing all these other things. That's as far as like the gore and like practical effects and stuff like that, I think they're pretty solid for a lower budget film. So the Leprechaun, he definitely has some like creative ways of going after people and like doing different things. He definitely does a lot of like rhyming and has like jokes, so at some point, like I said, it can be a little cheesy and like a little over the top, but you kind of have to expect that going into a film that's called Leprechaun. But basically, after all that's kind of said and done, they end up going back to the house, and that's where most of the rest of the film kind of like takes place. They end up, the Leprechaun finally kind of reveals himself because he attacks Nathan and the group, and from there they basically have to, they're trying to get the gold back to the Leprechaun so that way he'll leave them alone, and they get all of it back except for like this one piece because Ozzy ended up like swallowing it. So the Leprechaun, he goes after them. He tries to like scratch his like stomach open to basically like get this gold, and they end up finding a way on how to kill the Leprechaun, because they talk to the guy from way back in the beginning of the movie, and because he's at like this like nursing home like now, and they find out how you're able to kill a leprechaun by getting a 4-leaf clover. So that's how they end up taking him down. But yeah, this movie, like I said, when I was younger, I saw this a bunch because it used to be like on TV, like on Sci-Fi and stuff like all the time. So it's a very nostalgic movie for me. I've seen the whole franchise except for like the last two or three, like the recent ones that have just come out. I haven't seen like any of those, but I've seen like the first one all the way to, I think it was like Back to the Hood. So it's definitely like a really cheesy, funny series. Like overall, there's definitely some stupid stuff in there, but I think overall, as far as like the first one, it's probably like one of the more like serious ones out of the bunch. They definitely get a little bit more ridiculous from there because you have like Leprechaun in space, Leprechaun in the Hood, Back to the Hood. So this is definitely one of the more serious entries in the franchise. I do like the way that in this film, they kind of kept the Leprechaun in the shadows. And you didn't see him all the time for like a good portion of like the beginning of the movie. So that I thought they did a good job with. I guess this was like I believe it was like his first films, the director's first like major motion picture. So I thought for something being like this guy's like first film, I think he did a pretty good job. The actors, like I said, it wasn't like anything like crazy, like, oh my God, you're gonna like remember like this character, other than maybe like Jennifer Aniston, because it was one of her like first performances. But yeah, I mean, I thought, like I said, they all gave good performances. Wasn't nothing crazy, but they were very likable characters. You cared about them. And Warwick Davis, he did a good job portraying the Leprechaun. So this is definitely one of those movies. It's not going to be for like everybody. If you're looking for like a cheesy like horror film, and actually I was going to say 80s horror film, but no, this came out, like I said, in 1993. So, but it definitely kind of has that like 80s vibe to it. It could have kind of came out in like the later part of the 80s. So with a lot of those like, like weird creature kind of like flicks and stuff like that we had back then. But yeah, I think it's definitely, if you're a horror fan, I think it's worth checking out, especially on St. Patrick's Day. They usually have like a marathon. They're probably having one, I would imagine, like all day on like Sci-Fi or like AMC. So I would say check it out. Overall, as far as a grade, I would probably give this thing like a 6.5, 7 out of 10. So it's, you're going into it. It's nothing that's like really scary at all. You don't have to worry about that unless you're afraid of like little people or whatever, but it it's not anything too scary. The comedy is actually, I think, like pretty funny. And, I think that you'll overall have a good time. So, but let me guys, have you guys seen Leprechaun? Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Have you seen the rest of the franchise? Which is your favorite Leprechaun movie in this whole series? So, like I said, let me know down below in the comments. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure to hit subscribe as well as that bell button next to it, just so that way you do get notifications for all my new videos. Like I said, guys, at this point, we don't know when we're going to be really getting any like new movies coming out in theaters. Hopefully Black Widow and like Wonder Woman and stuff like that doesn't get delayed. So for right now, I'm going to be trying to do some like different older movie reviews. So keep an eye out for those. And as always, guys, make sure to check back for more Pop Culture with Pat.